What would you do if you found out that the two people you trusted most in this entire world were planning to destroy you, your fiancé, your own sister, the two people you would have taken a bullet for, secretly plotting behind your back to steal everything you own and leave you with nothing? Now imagine this. The only way to save yourself is to walk up to a complete stranger, a filthy beggar sitting on the palace steps, and kiss him. Kiss him in front of hundreds of people. Bind your soul to his forever, with no way to undo it. That sounds insane, right? But that is exactly what Sylvie did. And the man she kissed, the man everyone laughed at, the man the guards were throwing out like garbage, turned out to be someone no one in that room ever expected. And here is what makes this story different from anything you have heard before. The twist at the end is not just shocking. It is the kind of twist that makes you rethink everything. Every single scene, every quiet moment, every word he ever said to her. By the time you reach the end, you will want to rewind this entire story and watch it all over again with fresh eyes. But I am getting ahead of myself. Let me start from the very beginning. And trust me, you are going to want to stay for this one, because this story has more twists than a mountain road, and the biggest one comes at the very end. Every year, the Kingdom of Valdris held a grand celebration known as the Festival of Bonds. It was an ancient tradition, older than the palace itself, where men and women of noble blood gathered at the royal court to find their life partners. Now, this was not your typical matchmaking event. This was something far more serious, because, at the Festival of Bonds, two people did not simply get married. They bonded. Their souls were linked together through a sacred ritual that could never be broken. No divorce, no annulment, no second chances. You made your choice, and you lived with it for the rest of your life. Think about that for a second. One decision, one moment, and it defines your entire future. No going back, no do-overs, nothing. That is the world Sylvie was born into, a world of permanence, a world where one wrong choice could trap you forever. Sylvie arrived at the palace that evening, wearing a gown of deep emerald that caught the candlelight as she walked. Her dark hair was swept back from her face, her chin was held high. On the outside, she looked like every other noblewoman at the festival. Confident, elegant, untouchable. But on the inside, Sylvie was anything but calm. She had come to the festival with two people, Edmund, her fiancé. They had been promised to each other since they were children. He was tall, with sharp features and a smile that could charm the coins out of a merchant's pocket. On paper, he was perfect, handsome, well-connected, the kind of man other women envied. And then there was Elaine, Sylvie's younger sister. 2 years apart, they had grown up sharing everything. Secrets, clothes, dreams. Elaine was the one person Sylvie believed would always be on her side. No matter what, the one person she trusted with her life. Remember that. Because it is going to matter. The Palace of Valdris was magnificent. Crystal chandeliers hung from ceilings that rose 3 stories above the marble floor. Music drifted through hallways lined with gold leaf and ancient tapestries. Nobles from every corner of the kingdom mingled in clusters, laughing politely, whispering behind gloved hands, sizing each other up the way wolves size up prey. Sylvie moved through the crowd, Edmund at her side, Elaine trailing behind. Everything seemed normal. Everything seemed fine. And then something happened. Something that shattered Sylvie's entire reality and set this whole story into motion. She was crossing the grand ballroom, weaving through a knot of dancers, when her heel caught on the edge of a raised stone tile. She stumbled forward and caught herself against one of the marble pillars that lined the hall, her palm pressed flat against the cold stone. And in that exact moment, something inside her mind cracked open. It was like a dam bursting. Suddenly, there were voices. Not spoken voices. Not people talking out loud. These were thoughts. The raw, unfiltered, unguarded thoughts of every single person in the room, flooding into her head all at once like a tidal wave. The woman standing to her left was smiling at her husband while thinking about the man she had been meeting in secret. The lord across the room was congratulating his friend on a business deal while mentally calculating how to sabotage him. A servant carrying a tray of wine was silently cursing every noble in the room, imagining dumping the drinks over their heads. Sylvie gripped the pillar so hard her knuckles turned white. Her head was pounding. The noise was overwhelming. Dozens of voices layered on top of each other, each one raw and ugly and honest, in ways that spoken words never are. She thought she was losing her mind. She was not losing her mind. She was gaining something she never asked for. The ability to hear what people really think. Every lie. Every hidden motive. Every secret desire. All of it. Pouring into her head whether she wanted it or not. Now here is where things get painful. Because once you can hear what people really think, you cannot unhear it. And if you have ever had that gut feeling that someone you love is not being honest with you, if you have ever wished you could just peek inside someone's head for 5 seconds to know the truth, then you understand exactly how dangerous this gift is. Because sometimes the truth is worse than not knowing, and the first person whose thoughts Sylvie tuned into was the man she was about to bind her soul to forever. Edmund. She found him standing near the fountain in the garden, laughing with a group of lords. That easy, charming laugh she had always loved. She walked toward him, and as she got closer, his thoughts hit her like a fist to the stomach. She is so naive, so ridiculously easy to control. Once we bond tonight, her entire fortune becomes mine. Every last coin, every piece of land her father left her. She actually believes I love her. She actually thinks this is real. What a fool. What an absolute fool. Sylvie stopped walking. The world tilted. She felt like the ground had just been pulled out from under her feet. She stood there, frozen in the middle of the garden path, as Edmund turned and saw her. He smiled. That same warm, familiar, beautiful smile she had trusted for years. The smile she had fallen asleep thinking about. The smile she had believed was real. But now she could hear what was behind it. And behind it was nothing but contempt. She wanted to scream. She wanted to walk up to him and slap him across the face in front of everyone. But something held her back. A small, terrified voice in the back of her mind that said, "Check Elaine first. Maybe Elaine does not know. Maybe Elaine is innocent." She found her sister by the dessert table, chatting with another young noblewoman, nibbling on a pastry with that sweet, innocent expression she always wore. Sylvie walked toward her slowly, praying with every step that she would hear something good, something that would prove Elaine was still her sister, still her ally, still the one person she could count on. Elaine's thoughts came through, clear as a bell. "I cannot wait until Edmund takes control of everything. He promised me half of Sylvie's entire inheritance. We have been planning this for months. Poor Sylvie. My dear, trusting, stupid sister. She never suspects anything. She never questions anyone she loves. That has always been her weakness." Sylvie's world did not just crack. It shattered into 1,000 pieces. And I want you to sit with that for a second. Because most of us have never had the ability to read minds. But we have all had that moment. That moment where someone we loved, someone we would have done anything for, turns out to be someone completely different from who we thought they were. That moment where the mask falls off and you see the real face underneath, and it is ugly. She backed away from Elaine before her sister noticed her. She walked to a dark corner of the ballroom, pressed her back against the wall, and slid down until she was crouching in the shadows. Her hands were trembling. Her breath came in ragged gasps. Tears burned behind her eyes. But she clenched her jaw and refused to let them fall. Not here. Not in front of these people. Not in front of them. She sat in that dark corner and forced herself to think clearly. The bonding ceremony was in less than an hour. Once Edmund performed the ritual with her, the soul bond was permanent. She would be trapped with a man who despised her while her sister counted her stolen coins. There would be no escape, no way out. For the rest of her life, she needed a plan, and she needed one right now. That is when she remembered something. An obscure piece of history she had read years ago in her father's library. The law of first kiss, an ancient, nearly forgotten statute that said any woman at the Festival of Bonds had the right to choose her own partner by kissing him in front of witnesses before the formal ceremony began. Once the kiss was given, the choice was sealed, the bond was declared, and no one, not even the king himself, could override it. It was a desperate move, a crazy, reckless, potentially life-ruining move. All she needed was someone to kiss. Anyone. Literally anyone who was not Edmund, and that is when she saw him. And what happens next is going to change everything. Near the palace gates, a small commotion was unfolding. 2 royal guards were roughly shoving a man away from the entrance. He was tall, maybe the tallest man she had ever seen, with broad shoulders and a jaw that could have been carved from granite. But he was dressed in rags. His clothes were torn and stained. His hair was long, falling past his ears in tangled waves. He looked like he had not eaten a proper meal in weeks, maybe months. He was a beggar. And beggars were absolutely not welcome at the Festival of Bonds. The guards shoved him again, harder this time. "Move along," one of them barked. "This event is for nobility, not street rats." But the man did not stumble. He did not cower. He did not beg for mercy or plead for scraps the way a beggar would. He simply straightened his back, looked the guard dead in the eyes, with a calm that bordered on regal, and stepped aside, as if he was choosing to leave. Not being forced. That detail, that tiny, almost invisible detail, that is what caught Sylvie's attention. And then she tried to read his mind. Nothing. For the first time since her ability had awakened, Sylvie heard absolute silence. Complete, total, deafening silence. His mind was locked, sealed, shut like a vault. She pushed harder, focused every ounce of her new power on him, and got nothing. Not a whisper, not a fragment, nothing. Every other person in that palace was an open book. Their thoughts poured into her head whether she wanted them or not. But this man, this ragged, dirty, starving beggar, was the one person in the entire kingdom whose mind she could not reach. That should have terrified her. Instead, it did the opposite. In a palace full of liars and schemers, where every smile hid a knife and every compliment concealed a trap, this stranger was the only mystery, the only person she could not read, the only one who might, just might, be exactly who he appeared to be. Sylvie did not overthink it. There was no time. She pushed through the crowd, past the startled guards, and walked straight up to the beggar. He looked down at her. Up close, she could see his eyes. They were dark, almost black, and sharp with an intelligence that seemed completely wrong for a man living on the streets. There was no fear in those eyes, no desperation, only a quiet, watchful awareness, like a chess player studying the board, before he could say a word, before she could talk herself out of it. Sylvie grabbed the front of his torn shirt, pulled him toward her, and kissed him. The entire courtyard went silent. 200 nobles, 50 guards, a dozen servants, all of them frozen in shock. The kiss lasted 3 seconds, maybe 4, but it felt like a lifetime. And in those few seconds, Sylvie felt something she did not expect. A spark, a pull, like something deep inside her recognized something deep inside him. She pulled back, turned to face the stunned crowd, and spoke in a voice that did not waver even slightly. "I invoke the law of first kiss. I choose this man as my bonded partner. Let it be witnessed and recorded." The silence lasted another 5 seconds. Then the courtyard exploded. Edmund came charging through the crowd, his face twisted with rage, all that charm stripped away like paint peeling off a wall. "This is madness," he shouted. "She cannot bond with a beggar. I am her betrothed. I demand this be stopped." But the elders were already consulting the ancient texts. They huddled together, turning pages, muttering in low voices, and their verdict was unanimous. The law of first kiss was valid. The bond was declared. It could not be undone. Edmund screamed. Elaine collapsed into dramatic, rehearsed tears. The nobles whispered frantically. Guards looked at each other, unsure what to do, and, through all of it, the beggar stood perfectly still. His expression had not changed, but there was the faintest trace of a smile on his lips, a smile that, looking back, should have told Sylvie everything. His name, he told her later that evening, was Reeve. The bonding ritual was performed in a small chamber off the main hall. No flowers, no music, no cheering crowd. Just Sylvie, Reeve, and an elder who looked like he could not believe what he was presiding over. The ritual required a bite. A marking bite on the neck that would seal the bond between their souls. When Reeve leaned in and placed his teeth against the curve of Sylvie's throat, she braced herself. She expected pain. What she got was warmth. A rush of heat that flooded through her entire body, followed by a sensation she had never experienced before. Connection, as if a golden thread had been tied between her heart and his, humming with a low, steady vibration that she could feel in her bones. The bond was complete. Sylvie looked at Reeve. A stranger, a beggar, her husband, the man she had just tied her soul to for the rest of her life because she had no other option. What have I done? She thought, but she did not say it out loud. Because whatever she had done, it was better than Edmund. Anything was better than Edmund. Now, I need you to pay very close attention to what happens next. Because what looks like the worst decision of Sylvie's life is actually the beginning of something she never could have imagined. And there is a detail coming up. A small, easy-to-miss detail that is going to blow this entire story wide open later. Do not forget it. Reeve led Sylvie to his home. And I use the word home very, very loosely. It was a shack. A one-room, falling apart, barely standing shack at the edge of a dense forest, miles from the nearest village. The roof was a patchwork of rotting wood and dried leaves that leaked every time it rained. The walls had gaps wide enough to stick your hand through, letting in every cold wind and every mosquito in the region. There was no bed, just a pile of straw with a threadbare blanket thrown over it. No kitchen, just a fire pit outside surrounded by stones. No running water, just a stream about a 10-minute walk away through thick brush. Sylvie stood in the doorway and took it all in. She had grown up in a manor with 30 rooms. She had silk sheets, down pillows, a fireplace in every bedroom. She had servants who dressed her, cooks who prepared 3 meals a day, maids who drew her baths with rose water and lavender oil. She had never washed her own clothes. She had never cooked her own food. She had never gone a single day without the basic comforts that wealth provides. And now she was staring at a shack that most families in Valdris would not use to store their firewood. Reeve stood behind her, watching. He did not apologize for the shack. He did not make excuses. He just watched her. And Sylvie would realize much later that he was testing her. This was the first test. He wanted to see what she would do. Would she cry? Would she complain? Would she look at this broken-down shelter and demand to go back to her comfortable life? Sylvie looked at the shack. Then she looked at Reeve. "So," she said, "where do I sleep?" And she stepped inside. What followed were the hardest weeks of Sylvie's life. She burned every meal she attempted to cook, turning simple bread into charcoal and soup into something even the forest animals would not eat. She tried to chop firewood and split the skin on her palms open. She hauled water from the stream in a heavy clay jug and spilled half of it on the walk back. Her muscles screamed from labor she had never done. Her skin blistered. Her back ached every morning from sleeping on the hard ground. But she never complained. Not once. Not a single word. And Reeve noticed everything. He was quiet. This man she had married. He did not talk about himself. When she asked where he came from, he gave answers so vague they might as well have been silence. When she asked about his family, he changed the subject. When she asked how a beggar learned to speak the way he did, with vocabulary and grammar that would put most nobles to shame, he just shrugged and said, "Books are free if you know where to find them." But here is the thing that confused Sylvie. Here is the contradiction that kept her up at night. He was kind to her. Every single day. He always made sure she ate before he did, even if it meant he went hungry. He patched the holes in the walls before winter came. He fixed the roof while she slept so she would not wake up wet. He never raised his voice. He never lost his temper. He never made her feel small or stupid for not knowing how to do things that he found easy. And if you have ever been in a relationship where someone showed you kindness without wanting anything in return, you know how disarming that is. You know how it breaks down every wall you have built. Because we are so used to people being nice when they want something. When someone is nice just because it terrifies us, because we do not know what to do with it. But Reeve kept his distance. There was a wall between them, not the bond. The bond was there, humming constantly, pulling them toward each other like magnets. But Reeve held back, as if he was still watching, still studying, still trying to figure out who Sylvie really was underneath the noblewoman's manners and the emerald gowns. And Sylvie was doing the exact same thing, because Reeve did not make sense. He did not fit the story he was supposed to be. A beggar does not stand up to royal guards with the calm of a general. A beggar does not know the names of every kingdom's ruler and the details of trade policies from 20 years ago. A beggar does not carry himself with the quiet, effortless authority of a man who has spent his entire life being obeyed. At night, by the fire, they would talk. And sometimes Reeve would forget himself. He would start discussing military strategy, or the philosophy of governance, or the economics of grain trade. And Sylvie would sit there thinking, "Who are you really?" But she could not read his mind. That wall never came down, and so she had to do something she had never done with anyone before. She had to trust what she saw and felt, rather than what she could verify. Meanwhile, the rest of the world was not kind. Every trip to the village was agony for Sylvie. The moment she got close to people, their thoughts invaded her mind. The pity, the mockery, the contempt. Look at the noble lady who threw away her life for a beggar. What was she thinking? She must be out of her mind. Poor thing. Or maybe not poor at all, maybe just stupid. It was exhausting. It was humiliating. And it was relentless. The only peace she found was with Reeve, because his silent mind was the one place where the noise stopped. Being near him was like stepping into a quiet room after standing in the middle of a thunderstorm for hours. She craved that silence the way a drowning person craves air, and slowly, without either of them planning it, the distance between them started to shrink. But there were secrets, on both sides. And this is where things start to get really interesting. Reeve kept disappearing. He would leave the shack before dawn and not come back until after dark. Sometimes he was gone for 2 or 3 days straight. He said he was doing labor work in a town several miles away, hauling cargo, mending fences, whatever work he could find that paid. But Sylvie noticed things that did not add up. His hands were not calloused the way a laborer's hands should be. He never came home smelling of sweat and dirt. And sometimes, when he returned from his mysterious trips, there was a tension in his body that had nothing to do with physical exhaustion. It was the tension of a man carrying heavy decisions, the tension of responsibility. She did not confront him. Not yet, because she was carrying her own secret, hidden beneath a loose stone near the stream, wrapped in oilcloth to protect it from water. Sylvie had buried a leather pouch. Inside that pouch was more gold than most families in Valdris would see in 10 lifetimes. It was her personal savings, money she had set aside over years, separate from the family fortune that Edmund and Elaine were fighting over. Nobody knew about it. Not Edmund. Not Elaine. And definitely not Reeve. She kept it hidden because she needed to answer a question that kept her awake at night. If Reeve found out she was rich, would he change? Would the kindness vanish? Would the respect dissolve? Would she become, once again, nothing more than a wallet to the man standing beside her? And I think a lot of you watching right now understand that fear on a deep level. Because how many times have you wondered, does this person love me? Or what I can give them? That question haunts people. It ruins relationships. It keeps good people from opening their hearts. And Sylvie was living inside that question every single day. So there they were, 2 people sharing a broken shack, sleeping 3 feet apart, growing closer every day. and both of them hiding something enormous from the other. Both of them testing, both of them terrified of what would happen when the truth came out. And the bond between them kept growing stronger, pulling harder, making every accidental touch feel electric and every separation feel like suffocation. Then came the night that changed everything. And when I say everything, I mean everything. Wild wolves had been attacking villages across the region for weeks. Livestock slaughtered, homes torn apart. A child had been taken. The kingdom posted a bounty. Kill the pack. Earn a fortune in gold. Hunters came from all over. Many of them never came back. Reeve told Sylvie he was going on the hunt. She begged him not to. She grabbed his arm and looked him in the eye and said every argument she could think of. These wolves had killed trained warriors. Professional hunters with weapons and armor. What chance did a man with nothing have? But Reeve was immovable. I have to do this, he said. We need the money. Except Sylvie could see in his eyes that money was not the real reason. There was something else. A fire burning behind those dark irises that looked less like desperation and more like duty, as if those villages were not just someone else's problem. As if protecting them was his personal obligation. He left at dawn. And for 3 days, Sylvie was alone. Those 3 days cracked her open like an egg. She could not sleep. Every time she closed her eyes, she saw Reeve being torn apart by wolves. She could not eat. Food tasted like ash. She paced the tiny shack from wall to wall, wearing a path in the dirt floor, jumping at every rustle in the trees, terrified that the next sound she heard would be someone bringing news that her husband was dead. And somewhere during those sleepless, agonizing, suffocating hours, Sylvie stopped lying to herself. She loved him, not because of the mystery, not because of his silent mind, not because he was the opposite of Edmund. She loved him because of the way he always gave her the bigger portion of whatever food they had, claiming he was not hungry even when she could see the hollows in his cheeks. She loved him because he fixed the roof in the pouring rain so she would stay dry, then sat shivering by the fire afterward without a word of complaint. She loved him because every time she woke up screaming from nightmares about Edmund and Elaine, his hand was already on hers. His voice low and steady in the dark. You are safe. I am here. I am not going anywhere. She loved Reeve the beggar, the man who had nothing in this world except a broken shack and a torn shirt, and that realization scared her more than Edmund's betrayal ever did. Because loving someone who has nothing means there is nowhere to hide, no wealth to buffer the fall, no safety net, just two people and the terrifying vulnerability of genuine feeling, and that is the kind of love most people run from their entire lives. On the 4th morning, Sylvie was sitting outside the shack, wrapped in a blanket, staring at the tree line with empty, exhausted eyes, when a figure stumbled out of the forest. Reeve, limping, his shirt torn to shreds and soaked with blood, deep claw marks across his left arm and shoulder, crusted with dried blood and dirt. His face was gray with exhaustion, but he was standing. He was breathing. He was alive. Sylvie ran. She ran faster than she had ever run in her life, barefoot across the cold ground, and threw herself into his arms so hard that he staggered backward. She held him. She cried. She hit his chest with her fist and called him an idiot. She kissed his face, his jaw, his temple, the corner of his mouth, and then she kissed him properly. And it was not like the desperate kiss at the festival. This one was different. This one was a promise. He held her back. His arms were shaking from exhaustion, but his grip was iron. And later, after she cleaned and bandaged his wounds, after they sat together by the fire watching the sunset, he told her something that made her heart stop. During the worst of the fight, he said quietly, when the alpha wolf had me pinned and I thought it was finished, the only thing I saw was your face. The only thing I wanted was one more day with you, just one more day. That night, the last wall between them came down. Not the wall around his thoughts. That stayed. But the wall around their hearts. The careful distance they had both maintained. The caution. The holding back. All of it crumbled. They gave themselves to each other completely, body and soul, and the mating bond that had been half-formed and humming in the background finally locked into place with a force that took their breath away. It was overwhelming. Sylvie could feel his emotions as clearly as her own. Not his thoughts, never his thoughts, but his feelings. Joy, relief, tenderness, and love. A love so deep and fierce that it made every other emotion she had ever felt seem pale by comparison. Now I know what some of you are thinking. This is the happy ending. This is where the story wraps up with a bow. But remember what I told you at the beginning? The biggest twist comes at the very end, and we are not there yet. Not even close. Peace never lasts long in stories like this. Does it? About a week after the wolf hunt, Sylvie was outside hanging laundry on a line she had strung between two trees when she heard footsteps on the forest path. She turned, expecting a villager or a traveling merchant. It was Elaine. Her sister walked up the path wearing a fine traveling cloak, picking her way through the mud with visible disgust, her face arranged in that familiar expression of sweet concern that Sylvie now recognized as a mask. "Oh, Sylvie," Elaine said, "I have been so worried about you, living out here in the wilderness like an animal. I just had to see if you were all right." Sylvie did not need her ability to know this was a lie, but she used it anyway. And what she heard in Elaine's head was worse than she expected. Elaine knew about the hidden gold. Somehow, some way, she had traced the money, followed the withdrawals, pieced together the paper trail, and she had come to collect. Once they were alone, Elaine dropped the act like a discarded costume. Her sweet voice turned cold. Her innocent eyes turned calculating. "Here is how this works," Elaine said. "You give me half of what you have hidden. Half. Or I walk into that pathetic little shack and tell your beggar husband that his devoted wife has been sitting on a fortune this entire time. That she watched him bleed and starve while she had enough gold to buy a house. How do you think that conversation goes, Sylvie?" The threat landed exactly where it was aimed. Not at the money. Sylvie did not care about the money. She cared about Reeve, about the trust they had built night by night, brick by brick, through weeks of shared hardship. If Reeve found out she had been wealthy this whole time, if he learned she had hidden riches while he risked his life for a bounty, everything they had built could crumble. And this is the cruelest kind of betrayal, is it not? When someone uses your love for another person as a weapon against you. When they take the most beautiful thing in your life and threaten to destroy it. That is not just manipulation. That is evil. Elaine gave her 3 days. Meet me and Edmund at the old windmill on the hill. Bring the gold. Or face the consequences. After Elaine left, Sylvie sat on the ground and wrapped her arms around herself. Through the bond, she could feel Reeve's concern. A low pulse of worry from wherever he was. He knew something was wrong. But she could not tell him. Not yet. Not until she figured this out. 3 days later, she went to the windmill. Edmund and Elaine were there. Edmund, still bitter, still burning with humiliation from the festival. Elaine, smug as a cat with a mouse between its paws. Sylvie read their minds the entire time. Every bluff, every lie, every card they were holding. She knew what they wanted before they asked for it. She knew what they would settle for before they said it. And in the end, Sylvie made a decision. She gave them half the gold, not because she was scared, not because she was weak. She gave them half because she looked at the gold. And she looked at her life. And she realized something simple. That gold was just metal. Shiny. Heavy metal. It was not worth the peace she had found with Reeve. It was not worth the quiet mornings by the fire. It was not worth the feeling of his arms around her in the dark. And that right there, is a lesson most people never learn. We hold on to things, money, grudges, pride, status, and we let those things destroy the relationships that actually matter. Sylvie figured out in one moment what some people spend their entire lives never understanding. Let it go. Let the things that do not matter go. Take it, she said. Take it and disappear. Both of you. Forever. If I ever see either of you again, I will use everything I know about your schemes to bury you. And I know everything. Trust me on that." They took the gold and they left. And as Sylvie watched them walk away down the hill, she felt something lift off her chest that she had been carrying since childhood. The weight of people who pretended to love her, the weight of a sister who was never really a sister, the weight of a life built on lies. It was gone, and she was free. Now here is where the story takes its final, most devastating turn. And if you are still with me, this is the part you have been waiting for. This is the part I told you about at the very beginning, the twist that changes everything. A few days after the windmill, a royal messenger arrived at the shack. Not a villager, not a merchant, a uniformed messenger bearing the king's seal, riding a horse that was worth more than every building in the nearest 3 villages combined. He carried a sealed scroll, an invitation, or rather, a command. Sylvie was summoned to attend a grand feast at the royal palace. Attendance was mandatory. Sylvie looked at Reeve. Why would the King of Valdris invite the wife of a beggar to a royal feast? Reeve's face showed nothing. "You should go," he said. It would not be wise to refuse. Something in his voice made her hesitate. A steadiness that went beyond calm. An authority that did not match the rags he was wearing. But she was too confused to examine it closely, so she pushed it aside. When Sylvie arrived at the palace, everything was wrong. Or maybe everything was finally right. She was not treated like a beggar's wife. From the moment she crossed the threshold, handmaidens surrounded her. They led her to a private chamber more luxurious than anything she had seen even in her father's house. They bathed her in rosewater. They dressed her in a gown of silver and white that fit as if it had been made specifically for her. They draped a cloak of royal blue across her shoulders, fastened with a clasp bearing the king's crest. When she walked through the palace hallways, nobles did not smirk or whisper. They bowed. Deep, genuine, respectful bows. The same bows they gave to royalty. Sylvie's pulse was hammering. Something was happening, something huge, and she could feel through the bond that Reeve was close. Very close. The great hall was packed. Every noble family in Valdris was present. 1,000 candles blazed from chandeliers and wall sconces, filling the room with golden light. Music played softly from an alcove. Servants moved through the crowd carrying silver trays. And at the far end of the hall, on a raised platform draped in crimson and gold, stood a figure wearing a golden mask. The king. Sylvie was led to the front of the crowd. The masked king descended from his platform and walked toward her. The music stopped. Conversations died mid-sentence. Every eye in the room turned to watch, and then the king dropped to one knee. He took her hand, and even through the golden mask, even through the royal armor and the ceremonial cloak, Sylvie felt it. The bond, the unmistakable pull of the mating bond, the golden thread between their souls, humming so loudly that she could barely breathe. "No," she whispered. "That is not possible." The king reached up with both hands and lifted the mask from his face. And the face behind it was Reeve, her beggar, her husband, the man who slept beside her on a pile of straw, the man who almost died fighting wolves, the man who gave her his last piece of bread and said he was not hungry. He was the Alpha King of Valdris, King Caspian, the most powerful man in the entire realm. And he had been living in a shack with her for 2 months, chopping wood and hauling water and pretending to have nothing. Now go back. Go back to every scene in this story. The way he stood up to the guards without flinching. The way he knew every ruler's name and every trade policy. The disappearances. The tension when he returned. The reason she could never read his thoughts. He was an Alpha King, the most powerful being in the kingdom. His mental shields were impenetrable. The man who had sat on the throne during the bonding ceremony, the one who approved their union, that was a decoy, a body double, because the real king was standing in the courtyard in rags, waiting to see if anyone in the entire kingdom would choose him for who he was instead of what he had. The room disappeared. The nobles, the candles, the music, none of it existed. There was only Reeve's face, and the impossible truth written across it. Sylvie pulled her hand free. She was trembling, not with shock anymore, with fury. "You lied to me," she said. Her voice was quiet, but it silenced the entire hall. Every word cut like a blade. "You let me struggle. You let me suffer. You watched me haul water and burn food and cry from exhaustion while you had all of this. A palace, a kingdom, an army, everything. And you said nothing." Reeve stood. He did not look away from her. He did not flinch. "I had to know," he said. His voice was steady, but through the bond she could feel what it cost him. Underneath the calm was something raw, something desperate, something terrified. "Every person who has ever gotten close to me wanted my power, my crown, my wealth. I have been surrounded by liars my entire life. I needed to find one person, just one, who could love the man without the throne. And I found her. I found you. You chose me when I had nothing. You stayed when it was hard. You loved me when there was nothing to gain from it. Do you have any idea how rare that is?" Tears were running down Sylvie's face. She did not wipe them away. "I lived in a shack, Reeve. I slept on the ground. I thought we might starve." "I know," he said. "And you never complained. Not once. You had no right to test me." Reeve was quiet for a moment. Then he said the words that cut through every defense she had left. "You are right. I had no right. And I am sorry. But you tested me too, Sylvie. You hid your gold under a stone by the stream. You let me think we had nothing while you had a fortune 3 feet from where we slept. You wanted to know if I could love you without your wealth. And I did. I do." Sylvie opened her mouth, then closed it, because he was right. She had done the exact same thing. Different scale, different secret, but the same fear driving it. The same desperate, aching need to be loved for who she was rather than what she had. They had both been liars. They had both been afraid. And they had both, against all odds, found exactly what they were searching for. And that is the part that makes this story so powerful. Because it is not just a fairy tale. It is a mirror. How many of us hide parts of ourselves because we are afraid of how people will react? How many of us test the people we love instead of just being honest? How many of us are so terrified of being used that we never let anyone close enough to truly know us? Sylvie and Reeve both made the same mistake. And they both made it for the same reason. Fear. The fear that if someone sees all of you, the real you, they will leave. The anger left Sylvie slowly, like water draining from a cracked vessel. And underneath it, still there, still warm, still real, was love. The same love she felt in the shack, the same love that kept her awake for 3 nights while he was hunting wolves, the same love that made her run barefoot across cold ground to throw herself into his arms. She looked at him. Reeve, Caspian, the beggar, the king, the man. "If you ever lie to me again," she said, "I will make you sleep in that shack for the rest of your natural life." He laughed. For the first time in all the weeks she had known him, Reeve threw his head back and laughed. A real laugh, full and warm, and so filled with relief and joy that it echoed off the marble walls and made the entire hall break into smiles. He pulled her into his arms and kissed her, and the great hall erupted in thunderous applause. Later that night, Sylvie stood on the balcony of the royal chambers, wrapped in a silk robe that cost more than the shack she had been living in. Below her, the city of Valdris stretched out like a carpet of flickering torches, and from the streets came the distant sound of music and celebration. The people were celebrating their queen, the noblewoman, who became an outcast, who became a beggar's wife, who became the Queen of Valdris. Reeve came up behind her and wrapped his arms around her waist. She leaned back into his chest and felt the bond between them hum. Warm, steady, complete. She tried one more time to read his thoughts. Old habit, stubborn curiosity, the need to know. Silence. The same beautiful silence as always. She smiled. "I do not need to hear your thoughts," she said softly. "I just need to trust your heart." He pressed his lips to her temple. "That is the only thing I ever wanted to hear you say." As for Edmund and Elaine, when they discovered that the woman they had cheated, betrayed, and blackmailed was now the Queen of Valdris, the wife of the most powerful ruler in the known world, they realized something terrible. The gold they had taken was not a prize. It was evidence of conspiracy, theft, and extortion against the crown. They were brought before the royal court within the week, and it was Sylvie, seated beside Reeve on the throne, wearing a crown she had earned through fire and tears, who decided their fate. She did not have them executed. She did not have them thrown in a dungeon. She looked at Edmund and Elaine, two people who had once been her whole world, and she said, "You are banished. Leave this kingdom and never return. Take whatever gold you have left and build yourselves a life somewhere far from here. But know this, you lost something today that is worth more than every coin in every vault, in every kingdom on this earth. You lost family. You lost trust. You lost me. And no amount of gold will ever buy that back." They left Valdris that day. Sylvie never saw either of them again. Some people say Sylvie's ability to read minds was a gift. Others call it a curse. But Sylvie knew the truth. It was neither. It was a lesson. Because the one mind she could never read, the one person whose thoughts remained forever hidden from her, turned out to be the one who never once let her down. Everyone else was an open book, and every page was filled with lies. The only closed book was the only one worth reading, and that taught Sylvie something that no amount of magic or power or wealth could teach. Love is not about knowing everything. It is about trusting someone even when you cannot see inside their head. It is about choosing to believe not because you have proof, but because your heart tells you it is safe to let go. Sylvie spent her whole life surrounded by voices, hundreds of voices telling her who they really were beneath the surface, and every single one disappointed her. The one voice she could never hear was the only one that mattered. Funny how that works, is it not? And I want to leave you with something real. Something you can carry with you after this video ends. If you are in a relationship right now and you are constantly trying to figure out what the other person is thinking, if you are checking their phone, analyzing their texts, reading into every silence and every pause, ask yourself this: are you looking for the truth? Or are you looking for a reason not to trust? Because Sylvie had the ultimate lie detector. She could literally hear thoughts, and the person she ended up loving most was the one person she could never read. That is not a coincidence. That is the entire point. The people who are worth loving are not the ones who are easy to figure out. They are the ones who show you, day after day, through their actions, through their kindness, through the small, quiet moments that no one else sees, that they are worth believing in. So the next time someone you love does something you do not understand, the next time you wish you could read their mind, the next time you feel that desperate need to know for certain what they are thinking, remember Sylvie. Remember that sometimes the bravest thing you can do is not to demand proof. It is to offer trust, because that is where love begins. Not in certainty, not in control, but in the terrifying, beautiful, life-changing act of faith. Thank you for watching. If this story moved you, share it with someone who needs to hear it. Hit that subscribe button, and I will see you in the next one.